So this is the thesis from last time. While a very few enjoyed immense wealth, remember we talked about the very, very rich at the expense of the very poor. So we also talked about them. Others called progressives, which we're going to talk about today, work to improve the lives of the impoverished. Okay, so remember last time we talked about solutions such as unions and communism and muckrakers. They would be also, well, the progressives would be the muckrakers. Also, Samuel Gompers that wanted 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to work, and 8 hours just to be a human would also be a progressive. So they're working to improve the lives of the impoverished. So definition of progressive is a person advocating or implementing social reform or new liberal ideas. We're going to be talking about African American progressives today and female progressives, and then also an African American female progressive. And then we'll be talking about what people did for fun. So there'll be 5 questions throughout the lecture. And I need you to obviously be taking notes because you'll need to include elements of the lecture in order to get credit. So there'll probably be, I think, 15 points available for today. Okay, so this is just something kind of fun, and you don't need to write this down, but I just want you to take a look that this is how life was 118 years ago. So usually I'd ask, what would be shocking? And people talk about washing their hair once a month, or maximum speed in most cities was 10 miles an hour. Average wage is 22 cents an hour. Here's one more sheet on this. The one that obviously people think about the most is that marijuana, heroin, and morphine were available over the counter, like I had told you guys before. Only about 230 reported murders in the U.S. Of course, there probably were a lot more, but the reported murders, right? In Las Vegas, this population was 30. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Ida B. Wells Burnett. So Booker T. Washington, you don't need to write all this down, but just know that he was born to slave parents. He worked his way through school and founded Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. And the important part here is that it was a vocational school for African Americans. So vocational school is like a trade school, and that is really important in understanding Booker T. Washington. So this is a picture of him. So there's a couple of phrases that you really need to write down. So first off is dignify and glorify common labor. So usually I'd break you into groups and ask each group to, one group to answer that. But that's, hey, common labor, working as a laborer is dignified and it should be glorified. So he really believed, again, in those basic skill jobs. Okay, you don't need to write this down, but get maybe the gist of it is, okay, let me read it. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all matters essential to mutual progress. So what does that mean? Okay, so socially, blacks and whites, or African Americans and whites should not be together. But if we're going to work together, then we can be like the hand. So think about who would love this. And the answer is white people that didn't want to be around African Americans, right? Or African Americans that didn't want to be around whites. And that actually is what he's subtly introducing, which we're going to see in the later 1960s. Think about the Black Panthers, the kind of Black Power movements where they did not really want to integrate. And that's kind of what Booker T. Washington is saying is socially we don't need to hang out, Okay. So one of his very famous speeches that actually got him in quite a bit of trouble was about cast down your bucket. And again, these terms, I do want to see them in your answers. I want you to include as much as you can about each progressive, okay? So yeah, dignify and glorify common labor, about being separate, and also cast down your bucket if you want full credit. Anyways, what he's saying here is to the African American race, try to take advantage of the opportunities that are available to you. Cast down your bucket. It's like you're out on a boat and you cast down your bucket and you get the fish that surround you. Take advantage of the opportunities. And then to the white race, he's saying the same thing, cast down your bucket. In other words, take advantage of the African Americans, and I mean in a good way, like offer them jobs. Take advantage of the people that are around you. Okay, so this is Booker T. Washington. You can see here to the right in this picture, he's chatting with Teddy Roosevelt. He was one of the only African Americans that were invited to the White House. A lot of, people liked him. People nowadays, they have kind of a bad opinion sometimes. They think he was kind of a sellout. But one thing you should know about him is there was a lot of problems with lynching, and we're going to talk about that with Ida B. Wells Barnett too. But where African Americans were lynched, African American men, because of the belief or the rumor and the lie that they were raping white women. And what Booker T. Washington did is he assembled a team and he made note of wherever there was a lynching and then the real reason why, like maybe these people were collecting votes or something. And then he made a list based on the state. Well, states did not want to be number one on lynching. So it actually did lower the lynchings. Okay, so now we're going to talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. This is going to be a lot shorter. But take a look at his, accomplishments. He was the biggest kind of he was against what Booker T. Washington. He did not agree with what Booker T. had to say. He had a PhD from Harvard. He helped to create the NAACP. Okay, so think the main thing I need you to include in your answer about W.E.B. is that he wanted a talented 10th. He wanted cultured, highly trained African Americans who would set an example to whites and uplift other African Americans. So who would W.E.B. appeal to? It would not really be sharecroppers. They wouldn't understand what he was talking about, but he would appeal to white liberals and also African American more educated. Okay, so this is a poem. Usually I have two people read this, and it just helps students to understand the differences. So let me have to go ahead and read it by myself because I'm the only one here. So it seems to me, said Booker T, it shows a mighty lot of cheek to study chemistry and Greek when Mr. Charlie needs a hand to hoe the cotton on his land. And when Miss Ann looks for a cook, why stick your nose inside a book? I don't agree, said W.E.B. If I should have the drive to seek knowledge of chemistry or Greek, I'll do it. Charles and Miss can look another place for hand or cook. Some men rejoice in skill of hand and some in cultivating land, but there are others who maintain the right to cultivate the brain. It seems to me, said Booker T, that all you folks have missed the boat, who shout about the right to vote and spend vain days and sleepless nights in uproar over civil rights. Just keep your mouth shut, do not grouse, but work and save and buy a house. I don't agree, said W.E.B., but for what can property avail if dignity and justice fail? Unless you help to make the laws, they'll steal your house with trumped-up claws. A rope's as tight, a fire is hot, no matter how much cash you've got. Speak soft and try your little plan, but as for me, I'll be a man. Seems to me, said Booker T. I don't agree, said W.E.B. So think about the differences. Booker T is saying, hey, save your money, work, as a maid or a chauffeur or a laborer and save up for a house. W.E.B. says, but then they can just steal your house unless you're a lawyer. So you can see the difference. Okay, so question number 1 is with whom do you agree and why, Booker T or W.E.B.? So you need to at least have one sentence, and I want all the points that I've included, please, for full credit on Booker T and on W.B., which one you agree with. So you need to write on both of them and include all those main points in your answer to get full credit. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Ida B. Wells Barnett, and we're going to talk about lynching and this whole lie that African American men are lynched because they've raped a white woman. So she's going to respond to that, and she's going to have several different statements. So I'm going to ask you which statement you think is the most powerful, but I would like for you to mention a few others too for full credit again. So what she's saying is, you take a look at this, sorry, is that African-American men are being accused of raping white women, but really their relationship with the woman, it could be a white woman, is secret and voluntary. So he is not raping, it's a voluntary relationship. Okay, take a look at this one. Okay, what she's saying here is that during slavery, the master went away and completely trusted the slaves to watch over his wife and children. So now all of a sudden they can't be trusted. I mean, it's ridiculous. So she's saying, hey, they always could be trusted, and this whole thing is just a big lie. Okay, so in this one, they're saying that white men are saying that they're chivalrous, that they're gentlemen, but really they're not. And she's not trying to say anything bad about white women, but she is saying something about the white men, that they are not chivalrous, they are not gentlemen. And we'll talk about why in the next statement. So because of the million mulattoes, the mixed, half African-American, half white, we know that the white man is not a gentleman towards two different people. He's not a gentleman towards his wife, and mostly he's not a gentleman towards the African American woman that he's raped. So here he's accusing African American men of raping, but really he's the one that's raping. Okay, and then this one is saying that these Southern white men are not even treating white women well when they come down to teach the African Americans. So they were called the N-word teachers. And so once again, not gentlemen. Okay, so here's Ida B. Wells Barnett. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And how do you think she did with all of these statements? Yeah, as a result of her writing, she had to flee her home and her property was destroyed. But she was, very, very strong woman, amazing woman. Okay, so question 2 is, which one of Ida B. Wells Barnett's argument do you believe is best and why? And I do need you to explain. If you want to include some ones that you don't agree with, whatever, for full credit, that would be great. Just the more that you can do would be great. Okay, now we're going to move on to white female progressives, and the main one is Jane Addams. So you don't need to write all this down, but just know that, Jane was pretty well off. She attended college, but and she never got married. So her father dies, so she can't even take care of him. So she's left purposeless. And she and her friend Ellen Starr decided to devote their lives to impoverished immigrants in Chicago's West Side. Okay, so their goals were to, and you might want to write this down, to provide an alternative to the saloon. So they don't want the people going to the bars. They don't want them going to Tammany Hall, remember, where you get favors, right? And they also wanted to teach the social classes, like teach the working class how to be more middle class. So think about what kind of services that you could provide to do any of those things. Okay, so this is the things that they did have, and you might want to make a note of a couple of them because I'm going to ask you a question about them in just a minute. They had a gymnasium, youth clubs, men's and women's clubs, a chorus, concert program, debate club, university extension courses, art gallery, reading rooms, social science club, help newly arrived immigrants with employment, food, medical attention, and sanitation. So this is a picture of Jane talking to some young people, and you can see what they're doing here, doing some art. Here she's helping to take care of the babies, right? This is trying to stop the sweatshop system. You guys have a document actually on this, on the whole house, the playground. I think okay, I was just wondering if I gave you guys the sources, and I did. Okay. Anyways, this is a sociological study where they're going house to house and figuring out how many people live there and what kind of salaries they're making, and they're trying to do some political things. Jane Addams, also, I read a letter by her saying, can we please have some sanitation system? And village women, I know you in the villages in Russia or whatever, you just dumped your trash outside and the pigs ate it, but you can't do that in New York City. So anyways, they were very involved in making the communities nicer. So here is a cooking lesson going on. So question 3 is, why would you visit Hull House? What services would you find most valuable? So if you give me a couple, I appreciate it. All right. So these are other progressive women. So here the nurse is teaching the immigrant woman how to take care of her baby. But a lot of these people are coming from places where the children would die very young. In fact, they had a practice, I don't remember if it's Russia or it's like Eastern Europe, where they put a little sock of meat into the baby's mouth for them to suck on, and babies would die. So that goes into this one. It's pretty graphic, but don't kill your baby. Don't give them, if you look in the lower right, meat, bread, potatoes, fruits, sweets, coffee, tea, beer, right? Give them, I guess, cool bottled water, milk from a clean bottle. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the young girls and what they're going to be getting involved in. And it's kind of going to lead us into the 20s. But as young girls get jobs and begin to live in the city, they also begin to enjoy the freedom to go out and to socialize in mixed gender groups. Now, this was not allowed before. Like, Italian girls couldn't talk to anybody but the guy she was going to marry, right? So that, the immigrant parents are very, very strict. So when they go out and work in the city so they can do what they want, and some of them are, a little wild. So here we go. So because these young ladies make less money than men and even less than a living wage at times, it should be, they sometimes could accept a date with the knowledge that they would need to pay up at the end of the night. So this was this was not considered prostitution, but called treating. And I know people say, well, it's an escort or whatever, but really just kind of leave the modern day definitions aside, please, because this is just a totally different time where girls really couldn't make a living wage. Maybe you think that's now too. But anyways, this is just how this goes here. So since these girls were receiving gifts of material items and not involving themselves with dirty money, they were very clear they were not prostitutes. It was very important to them to know that to make it clear they were not prostitutes. So here's, some love the thrill of it. Now, in the 1880s, progressive women became convinced that young men were seducing young women and that the women needed to be rescued. So here is a gentleman trying to get a girl to go into a dance hall, and you see hotel rooms by day or week. So one very good result of their concern was progressive women worked to raise the age of consent. In most states, it was 10 to 12 years of age, so they raised it. In Delaware, it was 7, so they raised it to 16 to 18 years old. Sadly, white progressive women did not work to help young African-American women. They wanted solidarity with the South, so they gave up that fight. African-American women, progressive women, did the fighting, such as Ida B. Wells Barnett. So here's a group of African-American women that were progressives. Okay, so double standard, believe it or not, of course, girls who were found to be in a sexual relationship were taken from home and put in correctional homes. They were tested to see if they were virgins and if they had any disease, especially during World War II, where they were quarantined. What do you think happened to the boys? Nothing. Little slap on the wrist. That's it. Now, I show you this picture because I know we think everybody's kind of prudish, but this is Theta Bara, the vamp, and yeah, there was some kind of wild women during this time, which is going to lead us into our next area, which is pretty fun. Is after all that hard work, what can we do for fun? And Coney Island, you guys, was it's still around. It's in New York, and people now were working in factories, so they had a day off. When you're working on a farm, you never have a day off, right? You need to be, feeding Bessie. So Coney Island was formed. They used to have a East End where it was very rich, and then a West End where it was very poor, and there was a lot of gambling and horrible stuff going on. And George Tilliou, T-I-L-Y-O-U, said we can make more money out of decency, so let's build Coney Island. So they built several parks, Luna Park, Dreamland, I think it was Sea Lion Park. Anyways, they had a lot of bathing suit contests down there. These are some of the rides, and take a good look at them. So the whole idea is rebellion. The girls would, be with the guys, holding on to the guys. You can see this kind of slide, and there was no seat belts, right? And here we go. So you can't really have a corset on when one of these. And it's kind of to escape and to have a thrill, like you might go through a coal mining ride. It's like people really worked in coal mines, but this was supposed to be fun. They had fires, and this little people town with fires every day, and the fire trucks. They had pretend wars. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So this is like those horse rides that you can do at Knott's Berry Farm, but there's no seatbelts. So what I want you to do for question 4 is make up a ride for Coney Island and describe it. Please have it be a few sentences for full credit. And then the next thing that you do for fun is vaudeville. And vaudeville, the way that has helped me to explain this the best is America's Got Talent. So vaudeville was all over the country. There was like 25,000 performers, and it was all over the country. Any, local theater would have vaudeville, and they'd have 10 to 12 acts that you would watch. And here is one, this boy is doing this kind of dance routine, or some kind of a bicycle, or a gymnastics, acrobat, balancing. Singers, here's more singers, dog acts, stretchy kind of guy act, strongman act. Here's the young lady that's in a cage with 2 lions. This is Frank Cannonball Richards. People always love this one, where he took a cannonball to the stomach a few times. And the neat thing, you guys, about vaudeville, we'll go to the next one. Let me just do this. Is the farter. So he did melodies and impressions and even blew out candles. Unfortunately, there's no audio of him, so we don't know. But again, sorry, I just started the earlier sentence. The neat thing about vaudeville is you could speak any language, and you really didn't have to know English to go, and it got us like being Americans. And again, this is the lower class is doing this. The lower class is going to Coney Island. The lower class is doing vaudeville. And again, vaudeville's all over the country. Okay, so question 5 and the last one until your spring break is make up an act for vaudeville and describe it.